members of the panel, distinguished guests, sisters and friends. Many of us who are from urban societies tend to see the world as being confronted by a clash in values that pose a threat to ethical living. On the one hand, we are persuaded by the dominant values of globalization, whether we like it or not, transmitted via the worldwide mesh of cable TV and mainstream media, the internet and social media, international markets, communication, technologies, travel, and tourism. These values, amongst others, privilege and prioritize capitalism, materialism, and consumerism, as well as social status, competition, success, and the culture of fashion, beauty, celebrities, and the satiation of one's senses. On the other hand, we are correspondingly guided by indigenous civilizations transferred via family and social conditioning, civilizations that may have evolved over centuries and which may have as their key values notions of ethnic identity, history, family, cultural traditions, patriotism or nationalism, and insularity, as well as purity, spirituality, religiosity, and what is considered to be sacred. Now note that I am not saying that one is better than the other. While we may give precedence to values arising from either the local or the global as individuals, nonetheless, we cannot avoid being influenced by both. And in designing our lives accordingly, even if it means contradictorily, we are challenged with ethical dilemmas as to what is right and what is wrong. For instance, let's talk about the valorization of motherhood and fatherhood in modern society as examples of good values. How can one ethically be a good mother or a good father? You will note that values of motherhood and fatherhood are predominantly understood and treasured and practiced according to traditional gender roles, with the greater burden being on women to fulfill their mothering roles, as opposed to fathers, their fathering roles. You will agree with me then that there is thus distinct gender differences in the valuation of these roles. Ethnic conflicts, or rather ethical conflicts arising from gender differences are no more patently evident than in the case of parenthood in the families of women migrant workers. I take that as an example. Firstly, the values attributed to male migration are positive as against female migration, despite these women often serving as the bulwark of the economy in many labor exporting countries. Secondly, if women migrant workers happen to have children, they are denigrated and attacked in many of our countries for leaving their children behind, in contrast to male migrant workers who are not held up to such high ethical standards of parenthood. This is very often in spite of the fact that the decision of many women to migrate for work is often a collective family decision and may be due to contemporary economic pressures as well as family problems. Now, if children left in the care of fathers are neglected, abandoned, or if they are molested, there again, it is the mothers who are censured and not the abusive or neglectful fathers, conveying a discriminatory double standard. No doubt, the issue of migrant labor has many other ethical proportions, from harassment in labor-receiving countries to binding bilateral agreements aimed at labor protection, from labor skilling to women's right to work and economic empowerment, but most importantly, recognizing and demanding responsible fatherhood and holding fathers accountable for their families. It is therefore important to understand that our ethical perspectives, what we consider as right and what we consider as wrong, are not abstract. They originate in power and in privilege. They are located, they are relative, and they are, at the end of the day, they are loaded often with other values, with gender inequalities, with ideologies, and with politics. Thus, as discussed by my example, it is especially important to reflect on the ethics of values. In other words, what happens when values are put into practice? depending on the context and whether it is a man or a woman who subscribes and cultivates them. Undoubtedly, cultural, social, political, economic, ecological, and even sexual values and ethics are often the core of leading religious canons, from Hindu Vedic scriptures to the Buddhist Dhammapada, from the Taoist Tao Te Ching to the Confucian Analects, from the Jewish Torah to the Sikh Guru Grantha, and of course, the Christian Bible and the Islamic Quran. Yet, as noted earlier, never has ethics been more challenged than by today's external forces of global living and local tensions and their impact on personal values, as demonstrated by my earlier illustration of migrant women. Consequently, how are women leaders to reconcile themselves with ethical practices or ethical living in an increasingly complicated world? Let me offer you a few thoughts based on feminist ethics. As women leaders, we need to re-examine and reassess these social values, religious doctrines, political ideologies, and even ethical codes of living that have hitherto been seen as unassailable certainties. In so doing, we need to consider whether these values are based on the moral experience of women, or do they, in practice, depreciate, dislocate, or denigrate women's experiences? In addition, do they, in practice, marginalize the experiences of those who are considered poor, those who are considered to be different, and those who are considered to be powerless? Indeed, do they, in practice, degrade the environment and Earth's ecology? As women leaders, we also need to ensure that adequate moral value is attributed to the work traditionally performed by women, such as caring for children, families, the sick, the elderly, and the differently abled, but not in oppressive or exclusive ways, and not in ways that are detriment to women's own individual rights and individuality. Moreover, the same ethical standard of care has to be demanded from men. And finally, as women leaders, we need to devise practicable ethical strategies for all of us to deal with the quandaries of surfacing both in the public domains as well as private spheres of us as individuals. So, because let us remember that often ethical living is not easy. In fact, ethical living involves loss, whether it's loss in terms of one's ego, or whether it's loss in terms of financial profits, whether it's loss in terms of emotions, or friends, or family, and perhaps even in terms of love. In summary then, we need to rethink, revise, reformulate new ethical perspectives, not only on philosophy and religion, but also on contemporary moral and political life, and let's not forget on public policy as women leaders. And we need to transform these values into ethics and integrate them into our daily activities and long-term practice. And as this session encourages us to believe that every thought and every act will matter in the long run. I must thank Guruji and Ms. Bhanumati Narasimha, as well as the conference organizers in India and Bali, for inviting me and hosting me on this occasion. This year too, I am grateful for the opportunity to reflect on an issue that is of such critical importance to all of us, ethics, which should ideally be at the forefront of our consciousness. Thank you.